Oh man, I've been looking forward to reviewing these two episodes for years and years. It's taken me so long to actually do it that I even doubted that it would hold up today, and boy oh boy was I wrong. This story was crafted over several years as well, as it was originally a fan fiction novel written by the scriptwriter of these episodes. Can you imagine how awesome that must be though, to write an amazing Doctor Who story in the midst of the classic hiatus before I was even born, and then having it adapted on screen. I wish my Weeping Angels story I created on the BBC's Comic Maker was made into an actual episode. You guys remember that on their website, right? I have seriously fond memories of making countless comic strips with that tool. It's a shame I don't have any records of them to show you guys, but if you have any of your own stored on a floppy disk or something, I'd love to see them shared on my Discord server. And the Trailer Maker too. Oh, the nostalgia. Right, this trip down memory lane will be continued later. Right now, it's time to discuss two of the revival's most famous episodes. There is so much to discuss in each scene, so I do apologise if I gloss over some of the finer details. Please feel free to leave your own ideas in the comments below. The first episode, Human Nature, kicks off with absolute intensity. So many cuts, epic music, desperate protagonists, alarm bells, confusion, but it was all a dream. Or was it? Now we're seeing the Doctor and Martha in bizarre outfits that would be more akin to a dream, but everything's calm now, and the pair are acting like there's nothing amiss. Even the music establishes normalcy. However, the location, the year, bits and pieces of strangeness are mounting and contrasting starkly with that brief opening we saw. So many questions are racing through my mind, with the most perplexing one of all being why the Doctor is now completely human. This zoom that punctuates the scene completes a perfect opener to one of the most mind-boggling scenarios the show has ever put before us, and I love it. It's one of those times in the show that when I hear that sound, it genuinely gives me goosebumps. We see a montage of a boys' school John Smith teaches at. I noticed the flag protruding many of the shots, establishing the role patriotism and duty will play in the upcoming events. There's more strangeness established as we see the Doctor teaching with book in hand and cane in the other. A man who bows down for king and country and willing to beat children is certainly no Doctor we know of, unsettling to behold as he doesn't even give Martha the time of day. This would at first appear merely unkind, but Martha receives worse treatment from practically everyone else around her, and arguably the British system as a whole from that time period. The pompous superiority expressed by the characters fit right into the post-Victorian era. If Martha didn't have enough on her plate already trying to escape alien captivity, her experience as a black female makes me root for her to escape her situation of the whole world literally being against her. She has no support, just the hope that the clock will tick by fast enough for her pursuers to dissipate. She's the only outlier in this bizarre world she has been forced to play a role in. We are then introduced to nurse or matron Joan Redford, the romantic interest of John Smith in this story. The love triangle that is established between these two and Martha provides some of the most emotional parts of this story, from their first scene together to Joan's tragic rejection of the Doctor by the end. There's commentary on the human experience throughout this story. Here we initially hear of a boy who misses his mother, which John outright objects to, only for him to then experience pain of his own right after falling down the stairs. This scene shows how we all feel pain, foreshadowing those that would experience it the most in the upcoming war. The irreversibility of the Doctor's situation seems to be confirmed by the matron's diagnosis that he has only one heart, something previously performed by Martha in seemingly another lifetime. This is then elongated to a painful degree as she witnesses John share his dream diary. Hey, I've done that with you guys before. Don't start getting any ideas though. Oh, Harry, come back to bed and tell me more about your dreams. Seriously though, this moment is beautiful and something all fans of the show alike can relate to. Of course, knowing this episode was written by a fan shines new light on this moment, but the howling wind, the swelling music, and just how disturbing the entire journal looks induces tragedy into the viewer, as though all of the Doctor's adventures are a nightmare this John Smith character has just awoken from. Even Even the tragedy of Rose has been erased from memory. This shot of Martha here accentuates the issue though. What happens if he forgets about her too? Young Jojen Reed then gets a little scene showing how he can predict stuff before they happen. It's funny with hindsight seeing how this actor would essentially be hired for the same role but in a more fantastical setting years later. Same goes for Harry Lloyd as Baines, later being cast as Viserys Targaryen. What a coincidence! One other aspect of these stories I really liked was its focus on hiding and concealment. It sounds benign, but our protagonists are hiding in plain sight, altering how they behave and even their biology to stay off the aliens' radar. Baines finds a hidden stash of beer before meeting the family, who are also hiding as we never see their physical forms. That is, even if they have any, and their spaceship is invisible too. Even little Latimer hides his potential because of his size and intelligence, much to the disappointment of John Smith.
No man should hide himself, don't you think?
As both the character of Baines and Son of Mine, Harry Lloyd is definitely the star performer of these episodes. I cannot commend him enough for his firstly shrewd upper-class schoolboy role, perhaps taking inspiration from those around him whilst being educated at Eton College. But this is all combined and altered when he is infected by the family. Welcome to the family! You get the impression something's amiss when this discomforting low angle of Baines is shown, returning without the
blessed beer.
And this constant sniffing they do too, like dogs hunting the scent of their prey, but all they're getting is the scent of humanity. One intriguing thing that makes Baines the most interesting and fear-inducing member of the family is that he's a student of a school that teaches how to murder. I think this notion of him being a fusion of a creature that is murderous by nature and nurture makes him the most terrifying one of the pack. The scarecrows in these episodes would seem a little bit flimsy and harmless, but they're effective because they, like these children will be during wartime, are flimsy and harmless. Yet in this proud and defensive era of British history, these boys are brought up to be fighters in case of a proper and just war that the headmaster eerily forebodes. Like the boys, the scarecrows are forced to fight, and are certainly uncanny too. Murray Gold's score is nothing short of excellent in these stories too. I love how he's able to weave a children's choir singing a hymn into his own sinister piece. There's also the combining and transforming of music from the story's time period. Take the waltz that's heard playing at the school ball. It starts off with that descending dangerous note because Tim is in a place he shouldn't be, only for this gorgeous music to take precedence. John and Joan dancing are in a world of peace and harmony of their own. The rest of the world is out of their minds at this point. There are some wonderful melodies that crop up from time to time too. Take the piece that plays when Martha returns to the TARDIS. Her emotions are emphasized through this melancholy combination of violins, piano, and guitar plucking. As the scene goes on, however, and memories begin flooding back, the intensity increases, and all of a sudden we're watching the Doctor go through the painful process of transforming into a human. Not only is his mind being completely rewired, but one of his hearts is being disintegrated too. I mean, what a horrifying transformation to conceive of, let alone be forced to witness and then put up with for months on end. John Smith then saves a lady rather miraculously from a falling piano and afterwards fixes up a scarecrow. These scenes were good at fleshing out Joan as seemingly the only character to admit displeasure at the notion of boys being taught how to shoot. This dialogue examines how women had little to no say in the involvement of war or decision-making as a whole during that time period. Maybe if men had listened to peaceful and grieving women like Joan, many men's lives might have been spared. What happens afterwards is that we get a glimpse of the Doctor acting on John Smith's behalf. Also, the sight of a piano being destroyed breaks my musical heart. The pair move on to a field, and for some reason the honourable and learned John Smith decides to fix up a scarecrow. We establish the sun is setting from where they're walking to, and there's this haunting shot of the pair silhouetted, accompanied by some sharp strings heard from the score. Unfortunately, when we see the Doctor fixing it up, he's no longer a silhouette, as though a light is coming from somewhere else. It just doesn't look very good when they keep cutting back and forth from the Doctor being in shadow and then suddenly being lit again. I'm aware I might be nitpicking here, but it took me right out of this intense moment. No way was Joan's face reflecting that much light back at him. We then cut to the scene where the pair start getting romantically entangled. It felt a little bit Titanic if I'm being brutally honest, but I like this moment all the same because it was already established how well John Smith could draw. The pair really start going at it, and despite them even admitting it shouldn't be happening, Martha walks in. It broke my heart to see her going back over all the instructions the Doctor gave her, that even he didn't predict the very human ability to fall in love. There's a really nice bit of editing later later on when John and Joan are getting dressed up for the ball. John starts to approach Joan, and then we cut to a door opening rather alarmingly, as though Martha is going to burst in again, but it turns out to be Jenny, now possessed by Mother of Mine. Back to the family, there's something super creepy about the girl most of all. The red balloon acts as a symbol of danger throughout now, and the transformation of an innocent little girl into an alien hunter makes me feel really uncomfortable. Baines really steals everybody's thunder when they capture Jenny, Martha's friend.
Shut up! Stop talking! Cease and desist! There's a good girl!
Oh my God, you're scary. One side note I'll quickly mention here is that I love these guns the family have. They may look a little goofy or like a giant caterpillar gun, but the green laser matches their family's color, and they have no hesitation using them either, dismantling any ideas of how ridiculous they look the instant they start killing people. She's witnessing absolute betrayal at this point, and after everything she's been through in this episode, she becomes desperate, breaking character and begging the Doctor to return. Sadly, nothing seems to make him break, and treats her like a child that continually misbehaves. The cruelty of her surroundings makes it seem like all hope is lost for Martha at this point. It's not even emotionally damaging for her anymore, it's just sheer anger that she has nobody to help and support her at this point. At the dance, Daughter of Mine is positioned so disturbingly with the red balloon against a red backdrop, the danger amounting at an unstoppable rate. We cut back to the family searching through John Smith's office, and the music gets completely enveloped by low, sinister cellos, as though this peaceful music will inevitably be disrupted by destructive forces. To John and Joan, Martha also falls into this category of destructive forces, the pair completely unaware of the true danger that's to come. There's a captivating way that Martha is still able to control herself despite all that's happening to her, confronting Matron with careful words and ready to try her final gambit in spite of prying eyes and ears. The music goes quiet when she brings out the sonic screwdriver, and so does John. This moment is just so upsetting for me because John hasn't got a clue. The Doctor's transformation is unwavering. With the innocent veteran on the door murdered, a well-placed jump scare ensures that the kept on their toes for the rest of the episode. With an intimidating entrance, the family interrogate Mr. Smith, a scarecrow for every shot of the members to ensure that their presence is noted. Suddenly, all the work and pain the Doctor went through to ensure absolute concealment of his identity is being unraveled. With full knowledge of who John Smith really is, the family point their weapons at the two women that revolve around his tiny life, leaving us with one of the most jaw-dropping cliffhangers the show has ever produced. The cherry on the cake being that the final shot of this episode is another quick zoom towards John's face, just as the opening scene concluded too. Family of Blood opens with a full turnaround. Guns were held to John Smith's two favourite females. Now, with a minor distraction, Martha is ready to kill and commands the Doctor to get everyone out. I really liked that despite how menacing the family are, they're still in effect humans and thereby mortal and capable of making mistakes. Despite the order from Martha being directed at Mr. Smith, it is Joan who takes charge in evacuating the building. This unfortunately leaves Martha alone, and I love this moment when the family press on her to retrieve the gun. You have these shots getting closer and closer on Martha's face, Jenny's head tilting, and her erratic outbursts give off the impression her corpse is being puppeted in a way that shows little respect for human life.
Let's go to school.
And what about when we go to school? One surprisingly positive thing about the Doctor being human is that he summons everybody to take arms against this oppressive force making its way to the school. This is when the headmaster comes thundering into the room, and my god, for a character I initially thought was just a reinforcer of the patriotic values of Britain, he has a presence that completely stops the ruckus of the situation. He has become so accustomed to the peace of Great Britain, long may it reign, just as those in a year's time would be forced to acknowledge the reality of murderous brutality across the shores. Likewise, the confusion of how exactly the First World War broke out is akin to the headmaster not having a clue about John Smith's true identity and the motives of the family. His own creation, the young boy trained to shoot a gun, now grown up, has turned against him. The headmaster, who was brought up with the old 19th century ways, expressed previously that war is glorious and just and noble. More importantly though, British conflicts of the 19th century largely centred around places far from home. This particular character fought in South Africa, and many other conflicts included wars in British colonies like India and Hong Kong. The mentality of these men was that of the superior British against the savages of the uncivilized world. This attitude is going to change next year though, and men like him are in for a big shock. He claims he was a soldier and that he used his dead mates as sandbags. However, when one of his colleagues gets reduced to less than that, he runs away as the prospect of death looms over him. He will reap what he has sown. Now we come to a scene that should hold little significance, but one that I really love. Martha is trying to explain to Matron what exactly the Doctor did, but of course none of it's going in. Unfortunately, it is a truth that Joan will have to eventually come to grips with, blinded by love though she may be. I love how much effort went into messing up this set as well, because it reflects how altered the state of normalcy has become since the previous episode. We had the family looking through John's stuff then, and Martha is doing the same now. Unfortunately, she has to stop the top priority job because she's just about had enough of people treating her like she's a second-class citizen. Just before Martha gives Matron the lecture of her lifetime, we see a shot of her with a slanted framed portrait of what I'm guessing is a seal of the British Empire. Just as ideas of British superiority are being altered, so will Matron's in the coming speech. I love this total shutdown Martha gives. The idea that anybody could possibly doubt her capabilities as a human being at this point is diminished, and the scene is finished off with this jarring angle of the room shown to be a complete mess. Things are in such a chaotic state now, perceptions and ideas are being altered left, right and centre. The images of the boys preparing for war and then quaking with fear afterwards is heartbreaking to see. Not only because of this frightening situation put in front of them, but for what will come in a year's time, seen in the flash forwards Tim has after acquiring the fob watch. This allows him to have a higher purpose. Knowing when he's going to die makes him both cower in fear but also act to save the people of his hometown. This lonely little character has been profoundly altered by the Doctor's infectious heroism kept within the watch. These little patches of the Doctor's influence dotted through the episodes ask the viewer not to give up hope just yet. Tim manages to find his second ounce of bravery when confronted by the little girl. I love this moment because the cuts are intertwined with the sharp strings of the score. She even says, "Show me, little boy," which will be her undoing because she has forgotten she too is little. And so the attack begins. The soundscape of fear that is heard when they're banging at the door is crushing. Nobody should witness fear on this level, let alone schoolboys. Then the choir singing swells as the firing gets underway, possibly the most gut-punching moment of the entire story. John Smith doesn't fire once, as though all of Martha and Matron's pacifism pour into his mind, or even the Doctor taking over him here, making him reject the sickening circumstances he sees before him. This sequence is absolutely spine-chilling, saddening, and, for lack of a better word, glorious. Not that there's glory to be found in the fear of children, but glorious because it is an incredibly tragic moment. The sting in the tale is that they will gladly shoot straw men, but when an innocent child comes along to play on their backward sensibilities, they are at a complete loss when she shoots the headmaster point blank. The boys are left leaderless and paralyzed, with the final command to retreat. Holy cow. Another aspect of the family's undoing is that they bring the TARDIS to the school. Now, for the first time in my life watching this show, I genuinely pondered how heavy the Doctor's ship was. Depending on where you look on the internet, answers will vary. However, I'm willing to grant that because we know so little about the family as a species, and because Father of Mine selected the biggest bloke in the village, combined with an army of straw men, I'd say it's feasible to move the TARDIS. The only thing is, had they not moved it, they could have trapped the trio at its original hiding place and won. Hell, leaving the TARDIS in the hands of their straw army was a stupid idea. But when the episode established right at the beginning that the family have weaknesses too, there's leeway for the antagonists of these episodes to make mistakes. It's from here on in that David Tennant's performance truly shines. Throughout the story, John Smith was this ordinary, unquestioning realist. Now that he is forced to witness his dreams becoming a reality, reality, he breaks, demanding why he doesn't deserve this life with a job, love, and ultimately purpose. Perhaps there's a little bit of the Doctor coming out here too, realizing all he has done and will do will be for nothing, living out his life inescapably alone. The curse of the indestructible Time Lord. This whole sequence at the cottage is beautiful. The village getting destroyed by aerial bombardments. John forced to accept his fate whilst time is running out. Even Martha gets an astounding monologue about how different her life is now. Not only is she the Doctor's companion, but also vice versa. He is her companion too. She comes to accept she will never be loved by him, and thus neither suspected that John Smith would be capable of loving. Even after all that, it takes this new lover, Joan, to slowly console John. If anybody can convince him to sacrifice himself for the greater good, it's her. The emotion of this scene is just so great. David pulls my heartstrings in this shot so hard, but it doesn't stop there. Get ready to gush, because even Nurse Redfern had come to accept living alone for the rest of her days. Even this small glimpse of love she has will be snuffed out. But hey, don't just take it from her. Look at the wonderful, joyous life the two would have lived out. Oh my god, the music. The stark contrast between light and dark as we cut back and forth from present and potential future. This montage is sheer perfection.
But he could never have a life like that.
I've never had a life like that.
Oh, come on guys. 50 patrons. And that Father's Day video will be yours. The Doctor pretends to be John Smith, stumbling into the family's ship. It was great to see him fumbling and mumbling his way around the place. Even the family believing he was still human with that,
simple olfactory misdirection.
Yeah, that. It was also a little weird that the family had a self-destruct sequence inside their ship, considering their limited lifespans, but hell, I still love this scene. When he catches the fob watch and says, "Oh," I get filled with glee that my favourite time-travelling superhero is back to save the day. Or is he? What he does to the family is startling to say the least. Killing them instantly would be too kind, even though kindness is what he revolves around. There's something cruelly just about it all too, in that they will now experience the never-ending bitter loneliness of a creature that lives forever. Would you wish that upon a living creature? Is there a little bit of humanity still left in the Doctor here? This is probably a moment that many would call stepping over the boundary, but I think it's just the right amount, in that you have it circling in your head for days on end afterwards. Why did he do that? Was it right? Was it wrong? The decision was made though, and perhaps the Doctor may even live to regret it. Even Joan wants the Doctor to remember that in spite of it all, people still died in this village. The TARDIS may have allocated a random location for the pair to hide in, but ultimately people died because of the Doctor. I love this shot of them in this scene as well, as though John Smith's ghost is back to haunt her. Emma Hines' performance in these stories is nothing short of awesome too. In this final scene with her, she can barely muster a whisper out of fear, grief, and worst of all, loathing for the man that has torn her village apart. Even the Doctor cannot see his foolish desperation. The guilt must be overwhelming. When the Doctor and companion then reunite, it made me happy to realise we didn't get a Princess and the Frog type situation where Martha would resort to kissing him to change him back. After a well-deserved hug, the epilogue of the story presents itself as a lesson of history taught by John Smith, just as he taught the Battle of Waterloo to his students at the start of Human Nature. Although there's a slight twist in the delivery here, in that it's narrated to the audience. It's so bizarre that a catastrophic war of alliances produced such unnecessary bloodshed. I'm honestly so happy there's a Doctor Who episode based on the First World War, because historically it's fascinating. It certainly lacks the infamy and relative recentness the Second World War possessed, and yet arguably the First War was what led to the catastrophic events of the Second. If you want to learn more about the First World World War, you should check out the amazing work of a YouTube channel called The Great War. And I'm not sponsored, I promise. This channel documented week by week the events that took place 100 years prior and are still producing well-researched historical videos on the post-war events today. I highly recommend watching their videos even if you're not a fan of history and just want to find out what was going on in Europe back then. Only when you learn about this stuff do you truly realize why we memorialize all those that fought back then so that we never have a conflict like it again, making this scene with the poppies a perfect end to this perfect story. So, did it suck? Well, if you've been listening to anything I've been saying over the past 20 minutes or so, you'll know the answer is unequivocally no. With the exception of one questionable lighting decision, these episodes are, as Mary Poppins would say,
practically perfect in every way.
They are so incredible and are wrapped in historical context to an astonishingly accurate degree. Performances, story, music, setting, characters, uniqueness, emotion, editing, the list goes on. It's on par with the greatest Doctor Who stories of all time, so I'm giving Human Nature a 9.5 out of 10 and Family of Blood a 10 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Blink's up next, unless 26 patrons suddenly appear, which would be amazing. Was there anything you guys didn't like about these stories? Comment below your thoughts or share them with us on my Discord server, where we will continue this discussion. I think I've got a cold.